Native from Idaho, Meridian. Both families, 100 years plus. And early micron guy, and they put me in 47 countries. 47 countries and 50 states over the course of 24 years.
Well, that should mean that all this traveling on the campaign is nothing new to you.
It's not new. This is but you're right. It gives you a perspective, and you see what works, and more importantly, what doesn't work a lot of time.
Lifestyles are different, not just around the world, but around the country.
Yeah.
And even around the state.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Yeah.
The issues in North Idaho are not the same issues as in Meridian.
No. And that's, that kind of opens up into a whole host of other things. And Common Core is one of them. The education need is different in Meridian than it is in Riggins or Salmon or Rigby, or there's just a different demographic and a different need, which just goes ahead and emphasizes the reason why we want to try to manage that locally.
And how do you feel about Common Core?
Oh, it's been a very bad move. And ironically, I was actually part of that on the front end. I think it was around 2012. That came to the Senate Education Committee, and it was proposed in the form of a rule. So it wasn't legislation, it was a rule. And the Department of Education promoted that as a vehicle to make Idaho more autonomous in operating its education system. And I remember at the time we hit the pause button on that, and we had different people come in and testify, and it just, is this what this really does? But that was how that was proposed. So it did get adopted by rule. Well, come to find out, that was not it at all. It was truly, and upon implementation we saw, it's a one-size-fits-all kind of implementation. And although the federal government didn't, quote, mandate it, there were grants tied to it. So if we didn't comply, then, and I didn't know that at the time, but if we didn't comply, then the department couldn't apply for certain types of grants, and we didn't know that at the time. So there were strings attached to the whole thing, and there was a whole backside to that situation that we just didn't know about. And so ever since then, I've been an opponent to that. But also, when you're on the campaign trail, you travel around, and you see the different needs in the different parts of the state, and it just drives home that point that, wait a minute, the education needs need to be driven locally. You can't mandate that, certainly federally. I think you should mandate that on the state level. That's the genius of the parents and the local school boards and the teachers and the students to figure out in their own backyard.
Are you a proponent of homeschooling and charter schooling and all the different options that people are discussing?
Absolutely. One of the things that I have real gratification about is I was the Senate sponsor of the homeschooling statute in Idaho. That has really turned out to be a landmark piece of legislation, but we put homeschooling, the right to homeschool, in Idaho statute. And that keeps the state authorities from having the ability to intervene or to interrupt homeschooling. And that was really important, and that's turned out to be model legislation that has been used around the country now. That was 2009, and so I feel very good about that. We actually did that in a co-op with my own kids for a few years, and that's worked out really, really well. So that's a great right. And the other options have really proven to be fruitful in this state. The charter school movement, magnet school, it's like anything else. If you open that up to a little bit of competition and you put choices in front of people, then the consumer can be wiser and have different options. And so I think those are all good moves for Idaho.
On the other side of the coin, I've had questions about Tom Luna being on your campaign. Is he on your campaign?
Tom was he's technically, I think, a co-chair for Canyon County or something. We worked together for a number of years, I was on the Senate Education Committee. He was the, of course, he was the superintendent of public schools. And of course, we went sideways on the Common Core issue. But also, there's a whole host of other things that he did that most people don't remember because of the emotion related to the Common Core. And I supported those efforts, and it was not easy. It's not easy being a Republican conservative in the education community. And so he drove a lot of positive things too that don't get remembered, and so we've got a good working relationship. And so yeah, he is. We don't interact that much, and the boots on the ground for Canyon County are a lot different. But yeah, he's part of that advisory team.
Well, you know, there's an old Navy saying, and it may not be Navy, that's just where I heard it, that one oh crap wipes out 10 attaboys.
Yeah, I think that's how that's perceived.
Yeah, and yeah, Tom Luna did several good things, but he needs to get back out there and remind people sometimes, because otherwise all he'll be remembered for is Common Core.
Yeah.
And that's what they are associating it with you right now. That's why I wanted to bring it up.
Yeah,
So,
no, I see that too.
yeah. What about vouchers and things like that to allow people, you know, because some people, they just can't afford not
Right.
to put them in public school.
Right, so the way to do that is not with a voucher. The way to do it's with a tax credit, and here's why. And I support this, by the way. If we were to provide a voucher system to parents who want to put their kids in a charter school, a certain charter school, or a certain private school, or whatever, that means a voucher would mean that you take the money, you tax it, you take it, and then you have the ability to turn it back in the form of a voucher of some sort. Well, once the government has the money, they have a certain amount of control or a certain amount of influence over how that money is used, and they can put constraints on it. If we do it in the form of a tax credit, the money is never taken in the first place, and so there's no constraints on how that's used, and the government doesn't have a right then, when redistributing it, to put strings on it of any kind or constraints. So the answer to that is a tax credit is the appropriate vehicle to take revenue or allow revenue to be spent on the school option of choice for the family. But yes, I support that, but I don't want to take the money in the first place. I want that to be in the form of a credit. That way the government won't have further constraints on how it's used.